You're listening to the Comic Crusaders podcast. I am your host, Al Mega, CEO of Comic Crusaders and Undercover Capes. In this show, I'm sitting down with creators from all walks of life to talk about inspiration, process, the lessons they've learned, and a whole lot more. Wepa! What up, Crusaders? Welcome to another fire episode of the Comic Crusaders podcast. It's your boy Al Mega, as usual, bringing you the best in comics, indie creators, and crowdfunding. And today, we got something insane, baby, lined up for you. What if I told you Frankenstein's monster was stomping through the Civil War? What if I told you horror and history was about to collide in one of the most unique projects out there? Well, guess what? And get ready, because today we're going to be talking about that very thing with the mastermind behind this glorious mashup, the big boss himself, the one, the only Mr. David Swartz, baby. How you doing?
Good. How you doing, Al? Thanks for having me on, man.
No, thanks for coming through, man. I'll talk about this Madcap campaign you got going on that's live right now, folks, on Kickstarter. Don't you worry, we're going to be going through the Kickstarter, looking at the dope part. But you know what it is. We got to get into the brain of this mastermind and what inspired this craziness. You know, but before we do that, we love our origin story, Dave. You know what I mean? So for those unawares of your roots, you know, and your fandom, I don't know where you're originally from. And of course, what is the first thing in fandom that you, Dave, ever fell in love with?
Sure. So I'm out of the Detroit, Michigan area. I've been living just outside of Detroit for many years now. It's kind of a underground, artist scene of all walks of art. I've always been inspired by comics. It's sort of like the very first thing that kind of got me my creative juices flowing, as it were. So I've been into comics since I was a little kid. But I've taken a lot of twists and turns over the years. I did, more fine art stuff and abstract stuff like you see behind me. But ever since I was a little kid, I always wanted to draw comics. So I took this huge road around all different types of art and design. I was even a creative director at a marketing company for a bunch of years. But then I just decided I got to do something that I love. So I came back to comics, and I've been doing freelance comic book work for the last 10 years, trying to, first self-publish some stuff. But then I've been working just as a pencil for hire for the last, 4 or 5 years now. Wow. Yeah, it's been a long time. It's like my big full-time job. But then I've been doing all kinds of different artwork for my entire career. I've done murals, I've done websites, I've done, traditional painting and all kinds of stuff. So
interesting. All right. So when you were stepping into the game, then, into the comic game, if you will, I mean, was it easy? What type of steps were you taking?
I mean, I think when I first started, Kickstarter was still like in its infancy. Okay. When I first started 10 years ago, there were quite a few people doing crowdfunding indie comics, but not nearly what it is now. I mean, now the field is very, very big. So when I first started, I actually felt like in ways it was kind of a little easier just because there weren't as many projects to compete against. But I think over the years, yes, there has been a lot more people that have come into the scene. But I also feel like, I by doing a lot of other projects and collaborations with other people within the community, it's really kind of broadened my own sort of awareness of me and my work. So I feel like I've got a lot more people in my network that I once did not have. But at the same time, like I said, there weren't nearly as many projects crawling around Kickstarter 10 years ago as there are now. So
agreed, very true. And I could definitely agree. There's a lot of stuff out there. I mean, again, with as many pods that I've done, I've spoken to a lot of crowdfunding project. So, but it's amazing. I love to see that. It's the spirit of independence, isn't it? Now, let me ask you, with Confederate Monster, this sounds like Frankenstein met Civil War and said, "Hold my lightning rod." So, what's the wild pitch for this project that made you go, oh yeah, I gotta do this?
Yeah, so ever since I was a little kid, not only have I loved comics, but I've also loved universal monsters, especially Frankenstein. Frankenstein's like my boy. I just always have loved the character. I've loved, not only drawing the character, but just the whole, story that inspired the movies and everything that's come ever since. And so, when I first started, I wanted to create a horror story, and that's all I started with. Is I just want to write a horror story. But I kind of had this feeling like I wanted to start with an established character, and see what else I could discover within that world. So I sort of just shifted my perspective of Frankenstein, from the original time period, and from, because a lot of modern retellings of it, it's either the exact period that the Mary Shelley book was written, or it's more of a modern, take on the character. So I want to kind of find somewhere in between. It's where I kind of landed on the Civil War. And as I was exploring and researching the time period and the events and the significance of it, I just felt like there was a lot of interesting coincidence and synergy. Like one of the examples is the Confederate Union War was the first time that we practiced in field amputations. So I felt like the whole concept of like amputating limbs and Frankenstein just like really worked well together. But as far as like the elevator pitch for the book, I basically just tell people it's, Cowboy Frankenstein set in the Civil War. It takes place 8 years after the original monster was reanimated. And the main character that we follow around is Igor, but as he is known in the book as Daniel Schmidt. So he's sort of basically in hiding. He traveled to America right after they reanimated the original monster because it went really badly. So he's sort of just hiding out, trying to rebuild his life, until the Confederacy discovers his past and his secrets, and they kidnap him and they force him to reanimate their dead army.
Love it. And you answered my other question, like within, because I was about to ask you, how do you keep the balance between accurate history and Frankenstein ripping someone's arm off for dramatic effect? And yes, you had it. You answered it. I love it. So Frankenstein's monster in the Civil War got asked, who's getting the bigger glow up, the South, the North, or the undead science experiment?
I would say the undead science experiment. Yeah, I mean, it is the story, as much as it is a Frankenstein story. It's very different. It has elements of what you would expect in a Frankenstein story, but it is very much a different kind of take. Fresh take is how I've been saying it, because it really focuses on a character that hasn't really gotten a ton of attention, at least within the Frankenstein, mythos. Igor is not even part of the original book. He was more of a character made for the movie. And he's been sort of, kind of just relegated to this, servant to, his master, Victor Frankenstein. So, I wanted to create more of a, like a mentor-mentee kind of relationship between Victor and Igor. So Igor is more of a protege. He knows everything that Victor knows. Victor's been teaching him all along, because in my mind, Victor would want to almost like create a version of himself, just in case, for whatever reason, something went wrong, like, he could pick up where he left off, kind of thing. Because in my mind, instead of Victor only taking, I don't know, a couple years, because he's still pretty young when he is actually successful at reanimating a body. But my Victor is quite old, or at least older. And in my opinion, it felt more real that with such an immense sort of problem to solve, that it would take decades for him to figure it out. I mean, not just decades to figure out the secret of the whole reanimation process, but all of the other technologies that he would need in order to be able to be successful. So Victor's creating electric, energy. He's dabbling in the mind spirit connection with psychedelics. So there's all kinds of different, ancillary things within science and biology that he is learning along the way that culminate in his, great triumph of bringing back a dead body.
I
So
do
yeah,
not want to do psychedelics with him though, because he was going to be talking about bringing back dead bodies, man. That's not a trip I want to be going through.
hey, I felt like it'd be interesting to kind of mix
It would
psychedelics and
scare the
horror
shit out of
together.
me, boy. Get out of here, man. Why you
Hey.
looking at me like that? All right, so let me ask before we get into the Kickstarter itself. You're just thinking about it. In the alternate universe where you had to insert a completely different horror icon into the Civil War instead of Frankenstein's monster, who are you picking? Is it Dracula, the Mummy, or maybe the creature from the Black Lagoon, which is going to be completely out of his element?
I was going to say, I actually have plans for a continuation of this universe. Because I had a lot of people ask me questions about, is this story going to continue? Do you have plans on bringing in other well-known, universal monsters? So yeah, I mean, I actually wrote some very, very brief treatments for how I would bring in, some of these other monsters that we're aware of. But I would want to do more of a almost an American myth take on them rather than a European. A lot of these universal monsters are based off of European folklore. Yes. So I thought well, I could do a werewolf story, but what if my werewolf is like a Native American skinwalker? Or what if, like my creature of the Black Lagoon is set in Louisiana and there's like voodoo involved,
Oh man, that'd be dope.
Yeah. So like things like that are definitely on the horizon. And I have plans for it. I also want to bring in the Phantom of the Opera, a version of Dracula. I mean, Dracula's been very overdone, but things that are again connected more to American, myth and cryptic, if you will.
Yeah, baby, bring it. I'm digging. So right now, folks, this Kickstarter, it's live and it's rolling. That's the link below. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this up right now at the baby to the stage. Yeah, Dave's baby out there right now, Confederate Monster. All right, 1 through 5, folks. Check it. Before I show you this old video, that his pitch video. All right, let's check this out real quick. Out of $3,000 goal, happy to say, yeah, baby, she is funded at $3,078 with 85 amazing backers. Yeah, thank you for celebrating and supporting independent comic books and creators. But listen, folks, we have 16 days to go. That's a couple of paychecks. There's tax returns in the mist. So, don't be giving me no bullshit. There is money in the air, baby. All right. So, but we're going to give you the reason why you need to be checking this out. So let me take that out of there real quick. Let me make this baby big over here. We're about to check out this trailer, folks, and then we're going to dig in with more questions.
Yeah! Where's my wife? You hear me? Dismount and walk forward.
Darling, you're home?
And waiting for you with loving arms.
Must you maul her like an animal, Daniel?
Calm yourself, Mrs. Stevenson. I'm just getting into character.
They both insisted upon hiring Daniel's patients to cater. I too thought it would look as unseemly as it does.
Is that all you discovered while befriending Mrs. Schmidt, my dear?
Dr. Schmidt fits the description of our target in nearly every way.
Yeah, man. Wow, that book looks fire. That artistry, those colors, everything is just popping, homie. What?
Thanks, man.
What?
I went with more of a theatrical kind of trailer.
Yeah, dug it.
A lot of the trailers for Kickstarters are very like sales pitchy, just like bam, 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 buy my book. Which, I could totally understand because you're trying to like get your information out quickly. Our attention spans are not as long as they used to be. But I don't know, I guess I've always just saw the book as a very cinematic kind of story. So that's why I decided, let's do more of like a movie trailer.
No, and job well done. It's engaging. That's what it felt like that, especially how the scenes were coming up. And who was doing the sound effects over here and the voices?
It was all me and my wife. Yeah.
All right.
I did all the male voices. She did all the female voices. She actually, I had her do the kissing sound, so she's just like kissing her hand, on recording.
You
So
guys must have fun doing
yeah,
it.
no, it was fun. Like one of the high tier stretch goals that I have for this campaign and pretty much every campaign I'm doing for Confederate Monster is a radio retelling, like a radio show. So like doing the entire issue, but like an old timey radio show with sound effects and voices and all that sort of stuff. So that's my ultimate goal. If I can, get there, we'll see. But yeah.
So talk to me, man, and our fans, our fellow Crusaders out there. What are people can expect in the 5th issue now of Confederate Monster?
Sure. So number 5 is where the action really ramps up. The conflict is coming to a head. So we have all the soldiers are reanimated. They're being led by their reanimated leader, Stonewall Jackson. I have a couple of Confederate generals that I bring in that are historically accurate. And Stonewall Jackson's one of them. And, one of the things that, I wanted to do is I wanted to, make sure that there is a lot of really cool, like battle scenes towards the end of the book. So issue 5 has a lot of that. And issue 6 will have even more. But it's just, again, the conflict is ramping up. We got a whole undead army of Confederate soldiers rampaging to the White House to take Lincoln and basically force him to, surrender. And so our heroes, Igor, Victor, and the Monster, who are all reunited now, they're on their way to Lincoln to try to warn him and develop a plan to be able to save the day. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of really good art. As just kind of scrolling through there, some of the sample pages for this issue. I do a couple of big splash pages, one of which is a dream sequence or a psychedelic kind of horror, because our monsters are using psychedelics to reconnect their neural pathways so that they aren't like raging monsters anymore. But she wakes up in the middle of her dismemberment. So there's a pretty gruesome scene after that page where she is just all parts are deconstructed and she's, in a bloody mess.
Talking about falling to pieces, huh? Jeez.
Yeah.
Man, there you go.
Yeah.
Jesus. Hell no, bro. That would be absolutely it's worse than Saw. Jeez, bro. What are you doing?
Well, it's a Frankenstein book after all. I gotta bring the horror, right?
So, all right, so talking about that, because again, what's the most unexpectedly fun part of writing a historical horror mashup like this? And also on the flip side, what's the part that makes you want to scream into the void?
Well, I'll start with the second part first. The thing that makes me want to scream in the void is when I have a really good idea, but then for some reason historically it just doesn't like work, which is weird because I do take a lot of liberties with the time period and the technology and the historical accuracy of it. But I don't know, there's just some times where I just have an idea and I'm like, oh, that would really work. But then if I look at the history and it's just not feeling like it would make sense to me.
Too out of place.
Yeah, I just gotta can it,
Like a cell phone during the Civil War wouldn't be feasible,
Exactly. Yeah, there's only so much I can bend with the technology. I thought like electricity and lights and things like that were just enough that it's like, well, it didn't quite have that in the Civil War, but maybe Victor is brilliant enough that he invented it first.
He was homies with Tesla. They invented
Yeah.
it. And
Who knows?
it's kept it a secret for a minute. That's all.
Right. So that'd be probably my big headache. But as far as the joys of writing something that's based on of historical events, I think a lot of it is when I am in need of something and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to get it, but then I find something in the historical research that works perfect. Like one of the examples would be I actually have an issue 0 for this book. It's all black and white, and it sort of it bridges the gap between what happens when they first reanimate the original monster and how that event kind of catapults Victor and Igor in the direction of where we meet them at the beginning of issue 1. So there's a moment where the monster in the beginning is broke loose. He's just on a war path to the village below, and Victor and Igor have to, capture him somehow and bring him back, and without too much collateral damage, which, as you'll see in issue 0, there is a intense amount of collateral damage. But anyway, so I was trying to come up with, I was thinking like they would have probably some guns or some other kinds of weapons in order to, try to take him down or at least wound him or sedate him. But I was thinking it's Victor Frankenstein, like he should have like some kind of interesting looking weapon. And so I just went looking at the research of Civil War era weapons, see what I could find. And I found, and I don't know if this is an actual gun that they used or if it was just a concept weapon, because there's a ton of concept weapons for the Civil War era.
Okay.
And so there is this image of a 10-barrel handgun. So
10 barrels.
Yeah, it was like 5 barrels in 2 vertical like columns. And the thing was like this tall, and I mean it had one handle on it, so it was meant to be a handgun. But as soon as I saw it, I was like, yes, like that's what Victor Frankenstein would brandish as a weapon, because it looks familiar enough and it's plausible enough to be in that time period, but it's unique enough to be like, oh yeah, like that's something Victor would make,
That would be imagine getting shot with something like you get hit 6 times at once. That must be insane.
Yeah, the monster gets hit 6 times or 10 times at once. So
my God, bro.
Yeah.
Murderous. All right. So if you could sit down with Mary Shelley today and tell her what you did with her creation, how do you think she'd react? And be honest, would she be horrified, intrigued, or send you a cease and desist letter from the grave?
I mean, I would like to think that she would be intrigued as an author. Obviously, like I said before, Igor is not part of her story. And so by introducing almost what would be to her as a new character, in which to tell these other characters' stories through, I feel like there would be some interest there from her. After all, that story was conceived in a time when things were really messed up. I don't know if you are familiar with the impetus of how she came to that story.
Mm-mm.
So I'm probably going to get some of the facts wrong. But she and a couple of other like elites, well, I should say just well-off people, they hunkered down during, and I can't remember the actual date, but there is a period in our history where there was no summer, where we had one like long continuous winter, and it was due to like volcanic eruptions, and it actually prevented the permafrost from melting. And so we had this period of time where the summer was really cold. And so a lot of the rich people would basically hunker down in mansions and just have giant lavish parties. And so she hunkered down with a bunch of friends of hers, one of which I believe was the somehow connect. I don't know if it was Bram Stoker or if it was someone connected to Bram Stoker who wrote Dracula. But one night, one of the activities they did was they all challenged each other to write the scariest story they could. And so she wrote the beginnings of what would become Frankenstein. And it won the competition. Everyone was so just horrified by the whole concept of, someone being able to, reconstruct body parts together and bring life back to it.
Like, you sick lady, you.
Right. Well, and it was weird because like she was rather young when she first wrote that. I think she was only like 17 or 18 or something like that. I could be totally wrong with the facts here. But it just was very interesting to me to know that, this story that was so wildly influential on many people's lives, in my life, is just conceived out of such a wild event in our history, like a year without a summer. Just wild.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Please, I live in Massachusetts, and it's already enough. Like, we get to 40 and we're here in shorts. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
All right. So with every Kickstarter, right, there's always that one weird backer request. Have you got anything yet that makes you go, wait, you want me to do what now? Because, we're about to get into that.
Not entirely, at least not in this particular campaign. I have had, because I do a lot of commission work, not only for campaigns like this, but then just on the side. And so I've got some weird commission requests here and there, but nothing like that's too far out there. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do pretty much anything. Pretty much. There might be some things I would say no to. But I don't know. I've gotten weird requests like characters in bikinis, like Thor in a bikini or like something like that. But nothing like super over the top.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. And let's start breaking down viewers, because again, folks, you get started on this campaign for as simple as $1 because you're kind. Just because, hey, you have $1 to spare, why not? And throw another campaign. But now when you want to start getting some goodies, now we got some featured bundles here, right? So these are the available rewards. So featured bundle has a little bit of everything. So talk about this. What you mean a little bit of everything for $30, folks?
Yeah, so it's a physical and digital copy of the new issue 5, a Confederate Monster sticker, a coaster, and a 6x9 print that was originally going to be one of the stretch goals from the last campaign. And I typically would have done a variant cover, but I just ran out of time and budget. So I just decided I would repurpose a print that was previously not used and add it to this campaign. And it was originally going to be the cover of issue 4 until I threw the logo and stuff on it and quickly realized this is not going to work for a cover. But it works as a print. So.
Gotcha. And then we got issue 5 digital edition. All right. You can start shipping for $8. Now, how many pages of comic book goodness are we getting here?
So this issue is 20 pages. And then the last issue, which will be the next one, issue 6, is actually going to be close to 40, if not exactly 40.
It's about double size.
Oh, yeah. So the first issue and the last issue are double issues. And I did that because, like I was mentioning earlier, I always sort of saw this story as more of a cinematic or theatrical, kind of story. So, my approach to it was that of like a TV show. So I would start with like a larger first episode, or like a 2-episode back-to-back kind of thing. And then we would do shorter, issues in between. And then the last issue would be another sort of double issue or double episode in order to, really make it feel like the ending doesn't go by too quickly. Because after all, comics, you can read a regular comic book in about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on how fast you're flipping.
And if it's Marvel, it'll be like 5 minutes.
Yeah, right. So, I wanted that last issue to really feel like if you've invested this far into the story, that last little leg of the story feels like, you're getting a lot for what you've invested in.
I love it. And there we go. That print you're talking about is right there, right?
Yeah, it was
And
sort of my. Well, it was like my interpretation of like Frankenstein, the original monster. His brain like literally getting blown, like all of these different like memories and things, you know, are kind of coming back to him in fragments. And that sort of alludes to what I was mentioning earlier about utilizing psychedelics in order for these reanimated bodies to reconnect their neural pathways and gain maybe some of their memories, maybe not, because it's not an exact science. So
that's a really interesting way to talk about psychedelics. It's true because again, how people talk about it, how it used to be. A lot of these things were illegal at one point for psychiatric use. So yeah. I dig the concept. I mean, when it came to that particular concept, where did that get the seeds of origin from in your brain?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been very interested in alternative theories of reality, and you know, kind of who we are, where we come from, kind of stuff.
Are we in a simulation?
Right, exactly. And anybody who recognizes my name might recognize some of my previous work. So the book that I had published that I wrote and colored previous to Confederate Monster was called Feast or Famine. And Feast or Famine was a sci-fi story in a alternate dimension where Nikola Tesla and Albert Einstein partner together and just go on this like interdimensional space adventure. And so that story was very, very heavily influenced by my research into alternate theories of reality and science and how that, you know, kind of molds into our understanding of spirit and religion. And so part of that research was psychedelics and the effects that psychedelics have on consciousness. And so I've always had that in my wheelhouse. So when it came to doing Confederate Monster, one of the big things that I wanted to do with it was I wanted to kind of reinvent the reanimation process. Because in my mind, ever since the beginning of Frankenstein, we've always sort of stuck to this idea of like, oh, we're just going to zap the body with electricity and it's going to come back to life. Well, it might have worked for the first like 100 years after that original book was published. But in the last, I would say 60 to 80 years of scientific development and discovery, I don't think that electricity trick works as well as it once did. So I wanted to kind of explain it a little bit more, or at least give a different kind of twist to the whole concept. So plus I also wanted to give like a literal like secret ingredient, like there's something missing, you know? And so to me, it was not just about shocking the body back to life, but it was about like reconnecting someone's spirit with their body. Yeah. And the thing that kind of came to my mind was DMT. And for those who are unfamiliar with DMT is the most powerful psychedelic on the planet. And so my thought was, what if Victor discovered DMT? And what if he injected the brain of the dead body with a massive dose of DMT right before he shocked it back to life? And that combination of things would, pair the consciousness back with the body and allow life to come back. So it's kind of how I started with that.
I spoke with someone recently that has experimented with DMT, and they keep telling me how connected they feel to Earth, that Earth spoke to them.
Yep.
And the Earth is sad. I'm like, what? Like, yeah, it's like I'm no longer afraid to die. This is all nothing. We're energy. We don't die. I'm like, huh? He goes, this person tripped out balls. Let me tell you, shit. All right.
Doesn't take much on DMT. I've never done it myself. I've never done it myself. But I should also say that it it definitely shows you, like I've heard many stories of people describing a similar thing, which is it shows you that like your body is not who you are. And it does it in like some pretty gruesome ways. Like I heard a story once where a guy was out in the jungle in Brazil somewhere, did DMT with some shamans, and he quite literally like saw these like neon psychedelic jungle creatures come at him from out of the jungle and like tear his body apart, like go inside his body and just like rummage around in there and just start ripping it apart. And the weird thing was, is the way he described it, he was like, I wasn't afraid at all. Like I knew what they were doing. Like I knew that they were trying to show me that this is not me, that it's just a shell, that it's just a suit that we wear in order to have this human experience. And then after it's dead, it goes away and you go on and do another thing somewhere else in the cosmos.
That's crazy.
You know?
So that is so wild to me, all this stuff, man. Let me tell you. I dig it. Now I see you have an early bird bundle here. Is this still available?
So I got a weird glitch going on with that one. I don't know. I have literally tried to end it like a dozen times and it will not go away.
The bundle that doesn't die, just like Frankie.
Seriously, I put a date on it to end and it didn't end. So then I went back and I just manually tried to end it. And I've been trying to manually end it for weeks, or like almost like 2 weeks now, because it was only supposed to be on for the first 2 days.
The early bird has taken DMT and it just refuses to go away because it knows that it must still exist for somebody.
I am going to take it as a sign that for whatever reason, it's just going to be up there. So it is what it is.
Then you got a digital catch-up sale as well. Oh man, I love this number. 136 pages of story.
Yeah.
Which includes the prequel that you were talking about earlier for 32. Heck yeah, man. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a lot of fans from overseas that they really only digest comics digitally nowadays because a lot of the shipping is just too much. So, I wanted to make sure that if anybody hasn't known about the story, isn't caught up with it, that there's a really nice way that you can get, all caught up for a fairly reasonable price.
Yeah, and you can even get a physical catch-up right here at 64, baby. Look at it. Get that print, smell that ink, baby. Yeah.
Yeah, they're really nice prints too. For those of you who might be familiar with indie comic printing, Comics Wellspring is who I go through, and they're quite literally like 20 minutes down the road from me.
Oh, so, so you're local. All right, brother. Did you happen to go to IC3 this year?
No, I did not.
Yeah, I missed out because I had to celebrate my baby brother's birthday in New York, and it was planned a week earlier, and I was like, oh man, my first con of the year, not gonna be my first con of the year, darn it. I like that con. It supports independent creators, only independent creators, and it's only comic books. Okay, so it's a real Comic Con.
Yeah, I'm
last year, you have to check it out for next year. Last year was the first one. It was 100 creators. This year, I believe they went to 150 creators.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I gotta inquire to see how it went. I haven't seen too much, but I definitely, I hope it was great because I'm saying I had a great time last year.
Yeah. I mean, I just am very lucky and fortunate that I have a really quality printer, just down the road from me.
That's great.
And, I can go and actually physically talk to them.
See, I mentioned them because they sponsored last year's show. That's why when you brought them up, just brought me to them because they helped sponsor that last year. Hopefully this year too, because they are local. So it's like, yeah, that's dope. Dig it.
For sure.
Dig it. And look at this over here. What else we got over here? You got a tiny commission. What do you mean by a tiny commission?
So just like a trading card size. So it's only like this big. And again, I wanted to do some commissions because I mean, I am an artist after all. A lot of these Kickstarter campaigns, they don't usually do a ton of commissions because it costs extra money. But for me, like I can crank commissions out all day long. So I typically, I'm really excited to throw some commission options out there. This time I added the tiny commission. Last time I only had the mini commission, which is a 5x7. But I added the tiny commission because I just thought like I wanted to add something cool for the early bird that wasn't just like price reduction, you know? So I thought like, oh, I could do like a little tiny commission and it wouldn't really take me a ton of time to do. It would be kind of cool. And so that's where that came from. So it's on there on the early bird if you want to get an early bird. And if you wanted to get more than just one commission, you can add them on in the checkout. But yeah, I just do little headshot commissions typically. I don't do too much in the way of like backgrounds or anything like that. But for the larger ones, like the 5x7s, I'll throw in a little bit of something in the background.
Yeah.
But like the tiny commission, I'll probably keep it pretty simple.
And see, folks, some of you guys missed out. Look at the things, your physical cash up. Look at that deal. Holy shit. At 40, you guys missed. So this one didn't want to glitch, huh?
Yeah, those went fast. Well, there was only 10 available. So okay. Each campaign, I have a little cache of leftover comics from the previous campaign. And last time I did a run, I had 10 issues left from the last run. So since I already have the comics, I figured let's do like a limited stock sale. You can get these at a very reduced rate because you're not going to find that price anywhere else. And I think those 10 went within the first 48 hours. I think it was 2 days and they were gone. But again, it's because it's a good price for physical comics, especially when you're getting like, basically 6 comics.
And look at these, and look at the artists. So talk about, your cooperation with other creators like Morgan, which we've spoken to before, Caleb. Yep.
So I had just a library of some of my work plus Confederate Monster. So if you're unfamiliar with my other work, you really like what you see, you want to, kind of catch up on some other stuff that I've done, you can do that with my library. And basically it's a combination of some of the work that I've done in the horror, sci-fi, drama, so they're all kind of different genres. The first one, Bloodsmith with Morgan, is very horror, like Victorian type stuff. Very cool. I love that story. We're only 2 issues into it. I think it's a 3-issue arc. So we're still working on the last one. I hope that we can get to it later this year. But that one's really cool. That one's like about a guy who has like some kind of mythical connection to his blood. So he can like turn his blood into things. So like he will cut himself, and then the blood that comes out, he can like form it into objects or like use it as a lasso or like use it as a sword.
Think Green Lantern but with blood.
yeah, exactly. It's like Green Lantern with blood. That's actually a really good way of putting it. But then there's like a secret cult and a witch and a gunslinger. So it's a very cool story. Vampire Detective in Space with Caleb. That's a book we've been working on for a long time. And he was very gracious, allowed me to use issues 1 and 2 this time. So, for those of you who may not be familiar with Caleb's work, he's a phenomenal writer. He's very, very successful in the indie comic book scene. He does other books, including like Unicorn Vampire Hunter. His current one is Dragon Grit, which is doing phenomenally on Kickstarter right now. And then we are actually going to be, we're working right now on a continuation story of Vampire Detective in Space that's going to be a noir story. Yeah, so it's very cool. It's like it's all black and white, very classic noir detective kind of story. I just did 6 pages for it. I literally earlier today just finished all the layouts for the full first issue, and so I'm cranking on that right now. But then Feast or Famine is my other published book that I was talking about earlier with Nikola Tesla and Albert Einstein in an alternate dimension. That one is a fully contained 3-issue story. So that's a collected edition of all 3 issues. And the last one there is Undercity Tales issue 2. So it's again a self-contained story. Each one of these Undercity Tales stories are just one, kind of one-off stories. But this is kind of a little bit of a departure for me. It's more of a romance story, but it's like a romance with a race against the clock, car chase, mobsters kind of thing. So it's got a lot of cool action scenes, but it has a lot of heart. Scott Wilkie did a really great job with the story. And that was a book published with Bad Bug. So.
Oh, Bad Bug. Yeah, man. I've seen them around there. Awesome. This is a gorgeous book, folks. You already seen this. Look at this art. Look at this artistry. Everything that's going on here. Look at this. Look at these colors. Everything pops off. Lettering. It's just a beautiful looking book. Bro, let's talk these challenges, though, because it's a gorgeous book, but I'm pretty sure there's some things you got to deal with, right? So what's the hardest part of making Confederate Monster a reality, and how have you kept yourself sane in the process, or do you just accept the madness and just dive right in?
Well, I think there's two things that come to mind. The first thing is I'm doing it all myself, so I don't have anybody helping me.
What? OMAC, another OMAC on the scene, another one-man army corps here doing everything by himself, the one-man machine.
Yeah, it has its upsides, but it also has its downsides. The upsides are, if I want to make a change, I can make a change, no problem. I don't have to go through a committee. But if I need to crank it out by a certain time, that's challenging, because I only am able to really commit like 1 day a week to working on it. And I am fast. I can typically do like 2 full pages drawn, inked, and colored in a day, which is insane. But with Confederate Monster, it is my baby, so I typically go a little bit harder on it than I normally would. I put a lot more detail into it. But I would say the other challenge of the book, and I hate saying it, but it's the truth, just the word Confederate is very challenging to overcome for a lot of people. At least that's what I've discovered in talking about the book and marketing the book online. I've had a lot of support, a lot of people that, read it for what it is, rather than making an assumption. But I do have, people from time to time that come at me on socials and just, like, oh, if it's Confederate anything, I don't want anything to do with it. And it's like, okay, well, with all due respect, like, did you read the entire title? Because the second word is monster, and those 2 words together should explain it. But I understand, and maybe not just the fact that people read a word and make an assumption, but the internet algorithm bots themselves make assumptions,
Yes,
so that can also be challenging. One of the things,
the stuff I get flagged for sometimes is ridiculous. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I've seen 10 million times worse than anything I ever put up, and I don't put up anything fresh or nasty. So it's like, okay, this is strange.
I hear you. I mean, I don't really know the impact of it. Truly, it's a lot of just assumption. But I'll be honest, like, I didn't think I would ever get the Kickstarter, project we love because of that word. But I got it for this campaign. So I was happy to see that. I mean, even though, I'm not sure if it really does anything, other than, hey, it looks cool. But I was happy to get it, only because it made me feel like at least the book wasn't being overlooked, in that regard.
Yeah. Or shadow ban or anything like that because of the word being used. Again, it says the dope book, bro. That's why. So let's fast forward a few years. And Confederate Monster gets the Hollywood treatment. Who is your dream director, and what's your absolute must-cast actor for Frankenstein's monster?
Oh, man. 2 very difficult questions. I kind of, it's sort of like very, I would say, expected, but I mean, the first name that's coming to my mind as far as director would be like Guillermo del Toro. I just feel like that pairing would work really nicely. I mean, I know he's working on his own Frankenstein right now, So he may not want to do it after actually doing a real Frankenstein adaptation. But
Hey, this is the real Frankenstein too. Come on
well,
now.
the OG
Traditional, the
adaptation.
traditional.
Yeah, the tradition. There you go, traditional. I like that better. As far as actor goes, oh my god. Really, the only, again, my monster is meant to be the epitome of what the original monster was described to be. So gigantic, and so not just is he tall, but he is like gigantic, like not just like I would put him in the class of like Colossus, so he's not like a Hulk, but he's like got a giant frame to him.
See, do you watch Reacher at all?
I was just about to say the tall guy on the new season of Reacher.
Yeah, exactly. Paulie, right? That dude.
Paulie.
You made me, as soon as you said that tall, I'm like, you know what? It would be perfect because he makes Reacher look small. And
Right.
I didn't think that was possible.
Right. So some actor like that, I don't know if that would be the perfect choice, but it would have to be somebody of immense size, I think. Because it doesn't necessarily need to, I wouldn't think, need to be someone with an incredible acting chops. I mean, the character, after all, is a little bit of a brute in certain regards. But, when we first catch up with him again in this series, he's regained a bit of his mind. So he's, a lot more with it. But he's not necessarily a talkative, kind of character. So,
all right, now final question here: if Frankenstein's monster himself were here, and you had to convince him to back your Kickstarter, what's your 30-second pitch before he decides to throw you across the room?
You get to be a freaking cowboy in this. You get to wear a cowboy hat and a cloak, and you get to literally rampage across this entire army of undead soldiers. Who wouldn't want to do that?
There you go. Frankie, you get to kill and kill and kill again. There you go. Love it. I'm digging it, man. You're awesome, but I appreciate it. But folks, again, the Kickstarter campaign is currently live right now. We have, 16 days to go, as I said. That's a couple of paychecks there, a tax return or something. No excuse. Support independent comics, independent creators like my man Dave right here. All right. And we're about to find out one more thing here before we do go. Because again, support that campaign. Follow Dave all over the socials. He owns that name, Dave Swartz Art, baby. That's right. It's also the show notes that make life easy for you guys. Any appearances anywhere, Dave, that where we can shake your hand, maybe pick up some physical copies of these books and have a chat in person?
Not this year, but I am planning on doing some shows presumably next year. My thought was I want to start to build up a little bit of awareness of the series as we make our way into finishing it and moving into a trade collection. So my thought is that I'll probably be able to get close to finishing the entire thing. Maybe this time next year. It might take a little longer than that because it is a double issue. And the artwork is going to be just insane. I trying to remember, I think I have like 2 or 3 double page spreads in there. So it's just gonna be a lot. But yeah, I'm hopeful that I can, start doing some more shows next year to talk up, the book as we move into getting a trade collection. Because my ultimate goal, and ever since the start of making this book, I've always wanted to collect it into a nice, like, hardcover trade. I think that would just be so cool.
As I call that shelf porn.
Yeah,
you're gonna want to make it look nice and sexy, dope spine. Hell yeah, something you want to look at and pull out the shelves and be like, let me see. I have to read it again.
Yeah, I'm just so enthralled with the concept of that. So I'm really excited about it. Just as like a publisher, I think it would just be so cool. I mean, obviously I'm going to do a soft cover as well, but and with a trade, you get to do some other cool things like adding behind the scenes stuff, additional artwork that you may not have seen. I did a huge illustration of Dr. Frankenstein's original lab, because in our story, that lab and that castle is long gone. But I wanted to do this really cool, like very large cinematic, because it's got like the black bars on the top and bottom, widescreen kind of, shot of the original laboratory. And so I want to get that in the trade. Like, I think that would just be so cool to include as one big, maybe not like a fold out, maybe a fold out. I don't know. But that'd be cool.
Well, if you do the hardcover, make that the hardcover image if you have a cover on it. So if you remove the cover, you know what I mean?
It's not a bad idea. Yeah, it's not a bad idea.
Because again, I like that when I remove a cover of a book and if they've got nice art, it's like, yo, look at the art on that cover. I mean, I want to protect it with the sleeve. That's not going to show off to people. Right. You think this is gorgeous? Look at this. Hey, I dig it. All right, folks, again, please support independent comics and amazing creators like David on his Facebook, Instagram, and X. And again, it's the Kickstarter we're talking about, baby. It is live. It is live. Links are below. And show love for Confederate Monster, baby. Have you heard this? Have you been listening? If you guys are not hooked, man, clean your ears, listen again, tune into the madness that my man was talking about. Go ahead and visit that link and see the beautiful art, the dopeness of this book. And again, she funded, but we could definitely use more backers. Come on, baby. Let's make it happen.
Couple drop backers and we could go under. So we want to make sure we have enough padding.
Yeah, listen. No one's gonna drop because they really want this in their hands, on their shelves, to be reading to their grandchildren and terrify them during the night. I mean, this is perfect stuff, fun stuff, great comic books. All right. So, Dave, thanks again, my Crusaders. I see you out there tuning in. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you. You know what it is for everything Comic Crusaders, comiccrusaders.com, and of course the socials as well. Hasta la próxima, mi gente. Wepa! Thank you for listening to the Comic Crusaders podcast. If you like the content, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Also, please visit comiccrusaders.com and our extended podcast family over at undercovercapes.com. And also make sure to download the Comic Crusaders app on the Google Play Store today.